opportunity. Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure to be involved with the Maltese Historical Association. I think it's remarkable that in the year 2025 we can hear voices of Maltese people who came to Australia as migrants 100 years ago and even 110 years ago. I started recording these oral histories 40 years ago, and I want to begin by thanking Mark Caruana of Sydney, because he was very encouraging to my interviewing, and he shared his skills with me. I learned a lot from Mark. Look, during the 1980s, I reckon I recorded about 30 people who had come from Malta in the 1910s and 1920s. And overall, I've recorded probably 300 Maltese migrants, and many of those interviews are in the National Library of Australia. Today, I've selected 5 of those who were a century or more ago, and I've made excerpts from them. You can see here, Joe Meilak is one. That's my uncle Joe. He came out in born 1904 in Ghajnsielem, and he came to Melbourne in 1924. That excerpt is the longest one. It'll go for 5.5 minutes. Jean Barrett, Rizzo, she came out in 1914 with her mother as a 4-year-old. That's a couple of minutes. Paul Sultana from Nadur, he went to Broken Hill in 1924, and I've done a 2.5 minute excerpt of his interview. Josephine Cauchi, née Bartolo, from Bormla. She was born in 1912, and she came here as a 10-year-old, went to Adelaide in 1922. That's a 4.5 minute excerpt. And finally, Joe Vella from Mosta. He went to Mackay in 1920. His dad was one of the pioneers in Mackay. That's a 4-minute excerpt. So about 20 minutes of excerpts, plus me talking for about 20 minutes. That's how I've organised my presentation. Now, I've selected the excerpts to try and capture something of the reasons for people migrating, the nature of the voyage back then, and some early settlement experiences. I must say I love oral history. I think, as it says here, we record and preserve personal memories and first-hand accounts of past events. Usually we interview people who experienced these events directly, but I want to add something to that. To me, it's essentially about archiving the sound, the audio. The audio is all important. It's a way of experiencing history where we listen to the people who made the history. In the voice, we capture the uniqueness and personality of the individual. And no transcript, no matter how well done it is, can capture the expressiveness or the emphases, the pitch, the tone, the volume, the pace, the rhythm, the inflections, resonance, and the accents. And just as important as all that are the pauses and the silences. A bit of background, I thought we need a bit of context. The 5 individuals that I'm presenting tonight, they came here between 1914 and 1924. Malta's population at that time was about 213,000 to 217,000. Population in Australia was about 1,300. That's Malta-born people in 1914 and 2,500 in 1924. And I want to point out, even though the Maltese were British subjects by birth, they were subject to discrimination in Australia. And I've researched through official immigration documents where sometimes the Maltese were called semi-white. And this was used to justify quotas, restricted immigration throughout the 1920s. As British subjects, of course, they should have been free to migrate and settle like any other British subject. The labour movement also discriminated. The AWU newspaper said the Maltese were part of the Black Menace from southern Europe, stealing jobs. I've always wondered why jobs have a nationality. I would think a job is a job, but there you go. But there were some unions, like the waterside workers in Sydney, who did accept the Maltese as members. So it wasn't easy, especially back then. But the Maltese persisted. Quickly, some of my Maltese background. Here are my grandparents. They died long before I was born. I was born in 51. Loretta Machia, Tal Gajah, and Salvatore Meilak, nicknamed Tan Nasi. I'm sure you've all got grandparents or those that look would be familiar to some of you. But you can see by the nicknames, it was a marriage between a cage and a trap. I don't know what that means, but I think they were happily married because they had 11 kids. And this is the only photo of my dad, Loretto, or Lou, they called him, or Laurie, or Larry, But Loretto, he always called himself. That's him with his mother. You can see what a strong woman she was. She was from Gozo, as was my grandfather, but the family moved to Senglea for work, and that's where my dad was born. He was number 11 in the family. My uncle Joe Meilak was the first in the family to migrate. He was 20 years old when he came to Melbourne in 1924. And you can see that's him with the arrow pointing, a real strong Gosseton, hard-working man, very decent human being. I named my son after my Uncle Joe. And you can see the work. Initially, he did road work, digging into hills and mountains, and it was all done by pick and shovel and horse and cart. Very hard working, but after a few years he got a job on the Melbourne waterfront and he stayed on the wharves for 44 years. And that's him. I love taking photos of people that I interview. That's one of my photos of my uncle, late Uncle Joe, and I've talked enough for now, so I'll hand over to him, to his voice, where he, in a 5-minute excerpt, you can learn a lot about a family's history. There are references to the Anzacs in Malta in World War I because he saw them and experienced them. Reference to the high rates of child mortality in Malta back then. And also how young blokes got together. Uncle Joe worked on the Senglea ferries, and a group of them got talking and migrated together in 1924. But over to Joseph Meilak.
I'm interviewing Joe Meilak.
Oh, by the way, if the volume is a bit soft, please just turn up your controls. I can't do anything more from here. For volume.
Home in Ascot Vale in Melbourne. It's the 27th of August 1984. When were you born?
In 1904.
What part of Gozo?
Ghajnsielem.
Was it a large family?
Oh, we were, yes. We was 11 kids, but we lost four, like, or dead. And we still living like there was living seven. The four died. I only remember one because they died before me. Like three of them died before I was born. And one died between May and Mary, I think. God's little.
What were the names of the seven?
Seven, there's Jessie, me, Joe, Mary, Nina, Mick, Charlie, and Lou.
Well, how long did you live in Gozo?
I was about between 11 or 12 years old when I went to Malta. So I was living with my uncle in Vella.
And were your parents from Gozo?
Yeah. Yes, all person.
What were their names?
Like my father, Sam, my mother, Loretta. Laura, they call it, I think, but we call her Loretta.
She was on the chair.
Lucia, that's right.
I'd now like to ask you about school. In which year did you start school?
Oh, we started about six years old, I think. And I was about 11 years when I finished school. I went off school. I went to Malta working.
At school, what did you learn?
So I learned Maltese language, Italian, and a bit of English. That's only was what school where I was.
So you went to school in
What they call it government, but the scattered school, you know, like.
So what was your first job?
My job was in a greengrocer, what they call it, everything, like sugar and everything, all these things, and fruit and vegetables.
That was in 19...
In the wartime, in the First World War. It'll be about 1915 or something. So I was working for this fellow there. They had no kids themselves, and they wanted me, you know, like their kid. Well, I only was 12 years old. And I used to be like their son. They used to give my father or my mother some money, you know, all the time, and give me a few bucks from the son. And I used to go, the soldiers, the Australian soldiers in New Zealand used to come all over there where I worked. And I used to supply him with the thing because the boss couldn't talk English and his wife can't talk English. And I used to be selling the stuff for the soldiers, the troops. You know, apples and bananas, tomatoes, the long tape tomatoes.
Yeah.
They love the tea too, I get.
So you met Australians?
Oh, yes. Australians in New Zealand.
Were there many of them?
Oh, yeah. Well, they used to bring them there, the wounded, all the Malta. And the big hospital place there.
You were very young when you met
people
from Australia.
That's right.
Do you think that influenced your decision to go to Australia?
No. Just that we made our mind. I tell you what's happened. And I done 4 years in the grocers, and they don't want me to leave the shop. Now I went with the ferry boats for 6 years after that. 4 years with them, and I went with the ferry boats. What you see in the photo there, the ferry boats. Worked there 6 years, and I come here then after that because we was going to make examination for the captain to drive the ferry boat. Because the captains who got there, they could understand the word of English. See? The battleship destroyers and that used to come there to the harbor steamer. And then we got the books and everything. From what we have learned, the orders come that you have to be like a doctor and everything to go as a captain on the ferry boats. See? And then we said, well, we changed now. One said we was about 6 of us. One said he go to Australia. I said to Australia. Another bloke said to America. And we decided then to come here. See?
You worked with them on the ferry?
Yes, some of them. So, we was 4 together there, worked together. and we was ready for the captain. We passed from everything by the change the rules.
And were you all single?
Oh, the all single, young fellas like I was. See, some of them might be 2 years older than me, that's all.
I'm interviewing.
Yes, I hope you found that worthwhile. That's the longest of the excerpts that I've got. They migrated, as Joe said, a group of them who worked on the ferries. They wanted to be promoted, but the qualifications were changed and they weren't able to get promoted, so they decided to migrate as a group. Others at this time, you found married men sometimes would make the move, not single young fellas, and they'd work in Sydney or wherever for a year or two and test it out and then bring their wives and children over from Malta if they felt it was worthwhile. And that's what happened with Jean Rizzo, lovely little girl. That's how she was on the boat, 4 or 5 years old, in 1914. And this excerpt is sort of a summary of her father's experience. There's reference to him working in Tasmania, and it's not widely known, though it's in some of my books and articles, that there were a couple of hundred Maltese went to Tasmania between 1911 and 1914, and they worked for the Mount Lyell Mining Company on the northwest coast. It was very rough work and so different to Malta. You can imagine northwest Tassie compared to a Mediterranean island. But here is a 2-minute excerpt from Jean Barrett.
In the early years of 1912, he decided that he'd like to try and come to another country. So he found a ship that he'd done a working passage on it, and it came out, but he didn't know that he was going to Tasmania. But it landed him in Tasmania. He didn't even know where Tasmania was in the world. But after he was working, he was sleeping in tents, and they were road making in Tasmania. But between 1912 and 1914, he found a way in the early years of 1912, he decided that he'd like to try and come to another country. So he found a ship that he'd done a working passage on it, and it came out, but he didn't know that he was going to Tasmania. But it landed him in Tasmania. He didn't even know where Tasmania was in the world. But after he was working, he was sleeping in tents, and they were road making in Tasmania. But between 1912 and 1914, he found a way of bringing my mother and myself here. And we arrived here in June 1914, the last German ship to bring out passengers before the war. When he came to Sydney, he was working, he was earning £2.10 a week in wages. He joined the Wharf Labourers Union. He was stevedore, they called it, down in Bormla, unloading and loading the ships. And he'd done that for the rest of his life.
His intention all along, was it to bring his family?
Oh yeah, bring out here and make a better living for us, that's right, because my mother had to work in Malta to make 2 ends meet, as the saying is.
What are your earlier recollections?
Well, we came straight to Woolloomooloo in Nicholson Street. My father rented a place there, 12 and 6 a week. 2 rooms upstairs and 2 down, because nobody had a lounge suite them days. It was a dining room and a kitchen and bedrooms. And my mother started sewing. My father started to bring home £2.10 a week. And they thought they were quite comfortable. And things were different. Even, she could go to the shops and buy meat more often than she could in Malta. A lot of things like that. She never wanted to go back. She died at the age of 83 and she never went back to Malta.
The next excerpt is Paul Sultana from Nadur. I went to Broken Hill to do interviews in 1984. There was still a group of Maltese men who worked in the mines who'd come over in the 1920s, went to Adelaide and then went to Broken Hill. Paul was a tailor back in Gozo, but he worked in the mines in Broken Hill. That's an example of a passport application. Again, this is a 2-minute excerpt. That's the Ville de Strasbourg, the ship, French boat that he came out on. And there's Paul in 1984 in Broken Hill. You can see the cap, Gozo type cap that many of them wore back then. And I don't know who that young bloke is. I can't really recognise him today. But there I am interviewing Paul. Usually we'd record a couple of hours and maybe even a few sessions, you know. So these interviews are very substantial. They cover memories of the homeland, the voyage, settlement experiences in Australia. And I used to always try to end with a question about identity. How did they see themselves? Were they Maltese or Australian, or Maltese, Australian, or what? But this excerpt is about the voyage in 1924. Bear in mind the French and Italian boats, the passage, the fare was cheaper than the British boats. The conditions were pretty rough for passengers, for migrants, and they weren't always refrigerated, which meant, well, I'll let Paul Sultana explain how they got their fresh meat on the boats.
We went from Malta to Marseilles. We stayed there 3 days. We bought the ship Vella de Strasbourg, and we took 45 days to get to Fremantle. We landed Fremantle in All Saints' Day. We come from there, and all this ship, everywhere you go, you load, I think, unload stuff, you know. It's half merchant ship and half passengers, see? And in that days, there's no refrigeration. And as I told you, we have 2 bullocks on the deck and half a dozen pigs and chooks, you know, and all sorts of pigeons now for the French cooking. And I seen him killing these blooming bullocks. We always go watch him. There's a butcher or slaughterman, I don't know what they call it anyway. And this butcher, he used to put a punch in his brains between his horns and hit him with a hammer. Big, great big hammer. And the bullock down, poor old soul on his back. Same as the pig. And the pig used to yell out. The pig, when he catches him with the leg, and Jesus, we used to laugh.
So then, after he killed the bull or the pig, he slaughtered it on the deck?
Yeah, he skinned it on there and all that, cut it to pieces. I don't know what's happened. He cooked it. Otherwise, because we used to get it from the meat, you could smell it a mile away. It stinks like hell. We had to eat it. Starving. Either that or you eat the oats.
Then wash the deck down with the hose.
Oh, yeah. They used to wash the decks and all.
So, there you go. A voice from 1924, or describing the voyage of 1924. Now, there are 2 more to go, and then I'll be keen to have questions or discussions about it. Thanks for your patience. I hope the audio level is okay and that you're finding it interesting. Here is Josephine Cauchi from Bormla, 10 years old when she came out in 1922. I interviewed her for the National Library. See, in 1988, I started recording for the National Library. Prior to that, I was using my own little portable cassette recorder So the audio quality is much better in these interviews for the library. She speaks about, in this 4-minute excerpt, Mrs. Cauchi talks about the prejudice that her parents encountered as shopkeepers in Adelaide, and also I asked her about the conditions in the Depression of the 1930s.
How did you find people related to you as a Maltese, like the non-Maltese?
You know, I don't think being young, I don't think any difference, you know. I don't even notice anything like that.
What about, say, with your parents and father's experience? Did you
In father,
talk about,
everyone.
you know, the people being prejudiced towards him as a Maltese?
Oh, we had a bit of prejudice of that because we had the shop there, and in the other corner there was another shop, another chap opened the shop, you know, and he used to write on his window with chalk or something on his window. He was opposition to us, you know, and he used to write on his window, "Shop here before the day goes." You can say that both ways. Before the day finishes or before the day goes on the other corner. Shop here before the day goes. Oh, we used to get that all the time, you know. Or they used to come to the shop, "Come on, macaroni, packet of cigarettes, macaroni, or packet of cigarettes, spaghetti, come on," things like that. We used to get it all the time. And then my sister, when I died, she was a bit dark. "Come on, a Queen of Colombo, again, Queen of Colombo served me," you know, things like that she used to get. She used to get wild, you know, because she used to get mad. Queen of Colombo. Yeah, she'll be with all the day goes.
I wanted to ask you about the Depression years too.
That was bad. That was bad. I mean, to say the Depression, we had the shop, and people used to come in there for a half a candle, 2 cigarettes, a pint of vinegar, and that's all they used to come for. And then by the end of the day, "Oh, how much did we take today?" "Oh, Martha took 10 shillings. Then the man had come in with an empty beer bottle for 2 cigarettes and things like that. Oh, things was bad, you know, a quarter of butter or a couple of, oh, it was bad. We never suffered starvation then because, I mean, we had the shop, there was always something to eat, but that was bad. No clothes. And I remember even you couldn't buy any shoes. All I had was slippers in those days because they were only a shilling a pair and you could afford, you know, the times were bad. And things like that. Women used to come in for some trombone, take the seeds out because that's going to weigh a bit more. Oh, it was very bad. But we never, I mean, we suffered because we had no clothes and things like that. We couldn't buy anything. But
in the Depression years, would you have people coming in asking for credit or for food?
They used to come for credit. Yeah, they used to come for credit, and they used to come for food of some sort, you know, we'd give them bread and all that, and but all the credit, oh heavens, and all the people that paid us back when they took would be rich now. You know, so the nuns coming from the orphanage, we'd see if we had any stale bread. It used to be terrible to give them that, you know, but they used to come with their bag and they used to take the bread and to give them some groceries and all that, and then no one who kept them.
Would you have people just walking in off the street?
Walking off the street, you know, and you can't refuse them. What can you do? Oh.
Well, what would you do if it was somebody you didn't know?
You didn't know, you couldn't say, you just got to, you know, you've got to give them something. But, I mean, if anybody's hungry and all, you don't know what to do. They look so thin and, you know, raggedy and all that, you couldn't do anything. You have to give them something.
How did you find?
Yeah, interesting, isn't it? How she began by saying, "Oh, you know, about prejudice. Well, it wasn't too bad for me." But then as she opened up, it was quite clear that there was a bit of nastiness around. I think I've got about 200 interviews preserved at the National Library of Australia. Some of them, and I think Mrs. Cauchi's interview is available in full online through the online catalogue. So if you want to check any of these and listen to them in full, it's well worth doing. The interview with her was great because she was such a fantastic character and wanted to talk and was very honest. When I arrived at her home in Adelaide, imagine this, suburban Adelaide, I front up and there she is with the tribu doing the Maltese lace out the front in her front yard. And I had to take a photo, of course, and she brought that out from Malta in 1922. And she said that on the ship, the customs people kind of tore it apart a bit in case she had smuggled something in it. But I believe it's a bit unusual for people from Bormla to do the lace. But it's because, is that right? Does anyone know that it wasn't so much an industrial people living in the dock area? It was more the inland people who would do lace. But there she was. Finally, you can see why I love taking photographs. Look, Joe Vella, what a great face, what a great person. His father had migrated and settled in Mackay in Sugar District of Queensland in 1911. And it was a case where they had to wait some years before the mother and children could join him at Mackay. In Mackay, there's a terrific group of Maltese people and their descendants who are very active, and years ago they did a fantastic history of the Maltese in Mackay, and they did a lot of this sort of interviewing with the elderly locals who had a lot of knowledge. Now, Joe Vella, what I found fascinating with him, he arrived in 1920 as a 9-year-old, but he had these memories of the Maltese who were already there. He could name them. A lot of them were outside of Havana in a place called, outside of Mackay in a place called Havana and another place called Farley, but sort of part of the Mackay district. So in this 4-minute excerpt, the final one, Joe talks about those Maltese who were already there when he arrived with his mother and brother. And he talks about the general store at Havana, which his parents ran, and how it served as a kind of community centre.
I meant to ask about the other families who were at Havana when you arrived in 1920.
Actually, there were no families as families go, because there were Camilleri brothers, or Charlie and Andy Camilleri, were on a farm just past my father's place. And then there was Jack Muscat and Jack Cascuti, they were partners in a farm also, which was between Camilleri's and my father's place, then my father's place. The Guaras were there, Charlie and Michael de Guara, and also there was John and Joe Camilleri. And they were the only Maltese families at Havana in 1920. But at Farley, there was the Elans, and there was Ghajnsielem, and there was Joe Galia at Balnagown, and there was Matthew Attard at Homebush. That is all I remember of Maltese. Oh, there was another chap, Charlie Fennick. He went back to Malta. He had a son named Joe Fennick. Well, Joe came up later in 1922, I think. But he had another son here, whom I had never met. And there were two other chaps who were in partnership with my father on the farm. That's I suppose I know of the Maltese families that were here at the time of our arrival.
Were many of those from Mosta?
The Habanas were from Mosta, and Ghajnsielem was from Bormla, and Portellis were from Rabat, and Jogai was from Gozo, and I think the other two were from Gozo too. Close farms, a mile apart or half a mile apart. But later on the Sunday, they all congregate. That's when we had the store. So every Sunday there was a crowd. I left school, or I had already left school, and my job from then on was behind the counter serving. And in those days it wasn't supermarket style, but we used to write everything on a docket because it was all on credit, and then make up the parcel, wrap up parcels, and tie it with strings, and drag the string with our fingers, and then they put it in a bag and they take it home at horseback.
How old were you when you started?
I started doing, I was 15 and 1 month actually, because it was 1926 when we went into the store, and I was born in January 1911, so that makes me 15 years and 1 month old. And I stayed at the store. We sold it in 1928, I think it was, in 1928, to Mr. Maguire. But he only kept it for 15 months and found out he couldn't carry on, and they took it back on again and continued storekeeping there till 1935. My father sold the shop to my brother. In the meantime, I had married and took on a shop at Gargett, which is 32 miles away from Mackay. But in the meantime, going back to Havana, on a Sunday, all the crowd used to congregate in front of the store, and it was actually quite a meeting place, and everybody looked forward to the weekend on Sunday. They used to go to Mass on a Sunday, and on their way back from Mass, the women used to do their shopping in the store. Of course, we used to open the shop on a Sunday too, for the convenience of the people. And then that carried on. It was quite a community.
Now, before opening for discussion, I do want to make myself available. I often help people who want to do oral history interviewing. I'm happy to help. I mean, it's all because of my commitment to this area. But if you ever want any advice, I have question guides, for example, that are quite useful. I'm very happy to be contacted. There's my email address, and of course I just do this out of the love of the community and the idea of preserving these stories. So if you, or if you know anybody else who might want to take me up on that, I'm always available for contact by email. But thanks for your attention, and I hope you found it interesting.